The Legend of Zelda is one of the most beloved video game franchises in the world, and is responsible for revolutionizing the gaming industry on more than one occasion. For example, the original Zelda for NES was not only the first true open-world video game, but was also the first to ever feature save file system. Ocarina of Time became another huge milestone in the gaming industry by being one of the first 3D open-world games breaking the record for the most pre-orders of its time, and after almost 20 years, still holds the highest average review score of all time. When Breath of the Wild released after many delays, it quickly became another record-setting game, with many reviewers giving it perfect scores and praising it again for evolving the gaming industry and how the way games should be made. So I began thinking, what about the Zelda games that never made it to release? With so many games in the Zelda series being held to such a high standard, what could have possibly gone wrong with a game in a series with such a great track record that Nintendo chose to cancel the game, or in some cases never released the game even though it was already finished?
Well, this is where this new series comes in. In this first episode, we're going to be taking a look at 5 Zelda games that never quite made it to release. Some of these were cancelled during the middle of development, while others were actually finished but never officially released. More videos going in depth on other games from popular franchises that met with this same fate, as well as a follow-up video to this one talking about even more unreleased Zelda games. So if this is something that you're interested in, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. And be sure to let us know your thoughts on the games mentioned in this video, as well as any games that we may have left out. If we use it on a future video, we'll be sure to credit you for bringing it to our attention. And with all of that out of the way, let's get started. First to make our list is probably the only canon Zelda game that wasn't actually made by Nintendo. I'm sure most fans have heard of the Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, but what some new fans may not know is how connected they actually are, and that a third game was once in development alongside them, but was never completed. In a collaboration with Capcom, an idea was proposed to remake the original Legend of Zelda for the Game Boy Color. This idea was later turned into a trilogy of newer original games designed around the hardware itself, instead of adapting a previous game to the new console. Each game in this new trilogy would focus on its own piece of the Triforce and its own goddess. The Chapter of Power had a season theme, featuring the Rod of Seasons to alter the 4 seasons and solve puzzles. The Chapter of Wisdom featured an item called the Magic Paintbrush, which was to be used to solve color-themed puzzles. The Chapter of Courage was to have a theme of time, using morning, noon, evening, and night to solve puzzles. When each game was completed, you would be given a code that could be used in the second game, which, when beaten, would give you a code to be used in the third game. No matter what order you completed the games in, you would be able to have the full experience. In the end, this idea ended up being too complicated to develop for the Game Boy Color, and instead we were given Oracle of Ages, which focused heavily on puzzle solving, and Oracle of Seasons, which focused on combat. The idea of using a code to unlock a new story, final boss, and ending in the second game was still carried over, which made it essential to buy both versions of the game in order to have the full experience. Some of you may be comparing this to Pokemon, as they traditionally launch with 2 separate versions, but where most Pokemon games share the same world and have slight story differences and Pokemon that can be caught, each of the Zelda games were completely different titles. I just wish Nintendo would revisit this idea. How awesome would it have been for Breath of the Wild to release alongside a second or even a third version of the game, and each having their own equally as large overworld, dungeons, bosses, weapons, and everything else that you need to make a Zelda game. If I get a vote, I'd want the second game to revisit Termina, but again, on the scale of Hyrule and Breath of the Wild.
Number 2 on our list is BS The Legend of Zelda, and no, that doesn't stand for what you think it does. It stands for Broadcasting System. BS Zelda was essentially a remake or reimagining of the original Legend of Zelda, which, as you'll quickly find out, isn't the only time Nintendo tried remaking the original game for new hardware. But yeah, in the mid-90s, a long time before DLC or online gaming would be what it is today, Nintendo was once again way ahead of its time. On the Super Famicom, they offered an add-on called the Satellaview, which would allow your console to connect to the internet, where at certain times Nintendo would broadcast games that were only playable if you subscribed to their service. You would begin in the hub world, where you would select your avatar, a generic boy or girl, and take part in different activities, but at very specific hours, one of these activities would be BS The Legend of Zelda, where you wouldn't play as Link, but your avatar, which I think marks the first time Nintendo would allow you to play as a female character in a Zelda game. This is where the comparison between A Link Between Worlds and A Link to the Past comes in, since it was essentially the same overworld, but scaled down and refined. I believe a good portion of the top of the map was removed due to time and data limitations, and you were presented with an updated 16-bit version of the original 8-bit world. It's a shame this remake wasn't released as a retail title, because I know many people would have instantly went out and bought an official remake. Anyways, in this game, some of the dungeon layouts were changed around, more secrets were added, and most interestingly of all, you would have a narrator who in real time would give you time-sensitive quests. Once finished, your score would be added to the leaderboards, where you could see how well you did compared to everyone else who had played that night. Because it was broadcasted, you only had a certain amount of time to play it, and when it was over, that was it. To make it a bit more interesting, between certain times, for example, every 5 or 10 minutes, the announcer would do something to make the game more challenging, or easier, like refilling your hearts, making you more powerful, allowing certain rare items to appear in a secret spot on the map, among other things.
At number 3, BS Zelda No Densetsu. Similar to our last game, we have another BS Zelda game. It adds all the same changes to the original A Link to the Past, but at the time was presented as an official canon sequel to A Link to the Past, taking place several years later. You would again choose a male or female who would be known as the Hero of Light. All of the same alterations occurred: a slightly different overworld, a new story, and your own avatar character who is now the hero. You would have the announcer playing the part of the old man giving new quests and would have limited time to play. At the end, you could see everyone's scores on the leaderboards. It's also interesting to note that Zelda and Ganon had full voice acting for certain events. You would also be able to carry more than 1,000 rupees. This, your number of hearts, whether or not you had defeated Ganon, and many other factors were added together to represent your final score and would be compared to other players at the time.
While official releases of this game don't exist, dedicated fans have tried their best to maintain the original experience of the BS Zelda games, and have released them in ROM forms. Obviously, the audio and text has been translated from Japanese to English, but due to the randomness of the events the announcers would talk about, and almost every playthrough being completely different than the previous, you're still not going to be able to get the exact experience, but if you're a fan of the Zelda series, they're still really cool to check out. At number 4 we have Zelda 3. No, not A Link to the Past, but we have the actual first concept and idea for the third Zelda game. What A Link to the Past became is a completely different game than what it started out as. A lot of people may already know that development actually began on the NES and was quickly moved to the Super Nintendo. However, a lot of people still have never heard Miyamoto's original plans for the game, and that it was, in his own words, finished and ready to be released. But again, what ended up releasing was a completely different game. All of this comes from a 1989 interview between Shigeru Miyamoto and Yuji Horii, where they discussed development of their newest project at the time, which was Zelda 3 and Dragon Quest IV. The full interview can be found on Silicon Era, but I will just be covering the important parts talking about Zelda 3, or what we now know as A Link to the Past. In it, Miyamoto says, "I always have a backlog of 4 or 5 games, all being developed at the same time. I'm currently working on 4 Super Nintendo games, from relatively simplistic titles to huge productions. And that doesn't even cover all of it. I heard Zelda 3 is going to be for the Super Nintendo. Have you already started working on it? Yes, we're making progress little by little. What's it going to be like? Basically, I intend to make a return to Zelda 1 style. This is something I've had in mind since even before we began making Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link." That's awesome. Ever since I started making the first game in the series, I've been saying the third Zelda will feature a party, one that consists of the protagonist, who is a mix between an elf and a fighter, a magic user, and a girl. The fairy that appeared in Adventure of Link was actually a party member designed for Zelda 3, a girl who looked a little like a fairy and whose role consisted of reconnaissance. like the characters in action games that don't engage enemies in combat, but rather go and scout out the surroundings and return to you safely. It's only fun when action-adventure games let you choose who to send out. That's the sort of thing I'm thinking I'd like to put in Zelda 3. I've never been too particular about the story in games I've made in conjunction with Earthbound creator Shigesato Itoi. The stories of Mario and Zelda titles have always been supplemental to the actual gameplay. Action games only have stories attached to make the experience more interesting. Itoi is the one that writes the story, and I just help out a bit. We're more or less finished already. Now we just have to wait until release, but the factories won't make any copies for us. Really? Even though you're producing it in-house? They have to make a ton of copies of Dragon Quest. I'd like to wait until it comes out before releasing the game. Once Dragon Quest fever sets in, this year is done for. Curiously, staggering the releases affects the demand for the Super Nintendo. How has it been, making your first RPG? We started out developing it as an action game, primarily. We've been careful to maintain a high degree of originality, noting where we've copied something from another game, though not substantially, and where we've done something completely new. We're proud of ourselves for developing the game structure. The game structure of RPG titles is already more or less settled upon, and an RPG overworld is something anyone can make. But that's all the more reason to ask yourself whether it's good enough to use the same template as everyone else and simply expand the story on top of that. That's where the challenge comes in. These days, there's a gap between players who prefer a solid story to having new features, and players who prefer having new features to a solid story. That's right, it's difficult to balance the two. Do you think you'd like to continue making RPGs in the future? I hope to make a new game structure for people who can write scenarios like Shigesato Itoi can. Current game structures are being improved through the combination of elements from different game genres. I want to break away from that a bit. I think it would be ideal if I were able to create a game structure that represented a turning point, like the Famicom RPGs of old, for example. Miyamoto goes on to ask Yuji to consider developing for the new Super Nintendo console. So, from Miyamoto's own words, we were going to get a Zelda game that consisted of 3 party members, took more of an RPG approach, as the many references to RPGs suggest, and it was basically finished and ready to launch in 1989. However, we know the game wouldn't release until 1991. So, during the time between this interview and the game's original release after Dragon Quest, which was likely because Nintendo didn't want to have 2 major games competing with each other by being released around the same time, Nintendo or Miyamoto must have decided to keep working on Zelda 3. One of 2 things happened. They either decided to scrap everything that they had already made, or dropped the 3-party system, most of the RPG mechanics, and reworked the entire game to focus on just one single character that would get a new weapon in each dungeon and work with what we now know as the traditional Zelda formula. Those extra 2 years of development must have changed a lot. It's just crazy to think that again, in Miyamoto's own words, Zelda 3, an RPG take on the Zelda series that would combine the elements of Zelda 1 and 2 with a 3-party system, was finished and ready to ship in 1989, 2 years before A Link to the Past was actually shipped. While myself and most Zelda fans are more than happy with what A Link to the Past ended up being, I would still love to know what Zelda 3 could have been. Who knows, as crazy as the idea sounds, it could have ended up even better, or it could have felt nothing like a Zelda game, which you have to think, at this time we had Zelda 1, which was a top-down open-world adventure game, and Zelda 2 was the complete opposite, but still a great mix of side-scrolling, platforming, RPG, and action. So for Zelda 3, who knows what most fans were expecting, with no real foundation of what a Zelda game should be.
Before we get to number 5 on our list, we have some honorable mentions that we may cover in a future video. Obviously, we can't make a video like this without mentioning Zelda 𝐓𝐼𝐢, another game that was completely finished but never released. For those that don't know, it was essentially an expansion for Ocarina of Time that would have made use of the 64DD. Nintendo told us Master Quest was the 𝐓𝐓𝐢 expansion, but while it may have used certain dungeons designs from 𝐓𝐓𝐢 to remix the original dungeons in Ocarina of Time, fans were originally promised much more. Brand new dungeons, items, areas, a full 7-day and night cycle, and much more. Alongside this, we also have Zelda Gaiden, which was essentially the beta for Majora's Mask. Now that those two are out of the way, we have our final and newest game on the list.
Breath of the Wild released and broke rating records everywhere, instantly becoming one of the highest and best rated games to ever exist. Not bad for Nintendo's first true open-world HD Zelda game. So, if you were to tell me that a lot of the ideas and game mechanics from Breath of the Wild came from a 2D demo, I probably wouldn't believe you. However, that is exactly what happened. While we aren't sure if it qualifies as a complete Zelda game, Nintendo did create the foundation of what many fans would happily pay at least $20 to play as a downloadable eShop title, with many indie devs creating spiritual successors to retro games like Yooka-Laylee and Banjo-Kazooie, Mighty No. 9 and Mega Man, Bloodstained and Castlevania, as well as brand new IPs like Shovel Knight and Birth of 𝐈𝐧𝐬𝐭𝐽. Seeing a brand new Zelda game in the style of the original that started it all, but without the limitations of an 8-bit console like the NES? Just imagine all of the modern mechanics and new ideas that could be implemented into this new 2D Zelda game. On top of all of this isn't a new studio working on it, or part of the classic team that broke off to create a spiritual successor, like in Yooka-Laylee's case. This was actually made by Nintendo, with Aonuma and Miyamoto still in charge. Again, we don't know how complete it was, how many dungeons it had, or really what most of the game even looked like, but we do know that enough of it was created that they were able to test out new ideas that would eventually end up in Breath of the Wild. So just imagine a weird mix of the original 2D Legend of Zelda and Breath of the Wild. The sad thing is, unless this turns out to be Nintendo's next 2D Zelda game, after all, it seems the foundation of the game is already there, then like the other games on this list, we won't ever be able to play this game either. Though, if it isn't the next 2D title, it would be nice for Nintendo to release it as a demo or a playable experience for just $10 to $20 on the Switch's eShop. After all, it's already made, and if it isn't complete, I'm sure it wouldn't take much to turn it into just a quick demo. Maybe even turn it into a quick 1 or 2 dungeon experience, where just like the BS games I mentioned earlier on this list, after completing them, your rupees, time, health, number of enemies killed, and everything else would be added up and posted on a leaderboard to compare with your friends and other speedrunners. But that's just an idea. This brings us to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this as much as I have, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. Once again, if you're a fan of this channel, feel free to join our public Discord to chat with fans of this channel, myself, and fans of Nintendo and Zelda. Please subscribe, like, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. And once again, I want to give a shout out to my top 10 best and worst of Breath of the Wild. So if you want, please go check out that video. I want to thank you all for watching this video and welcome to the end slate. If you're a fan of these videos, you can follow me on Twitter for updates on future videos at @GameOverJesse. Please subscribe, like, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you would like to watch even more of my videos, click the video to the left or let me know what types of videos you would like to see in the future. I would like to take the rest of this time to thank all of my Patreon supporters. If you're a fan of this channel and would also like to help us out by becoming a Patreon supporter and get some awesome rewards for yourself, like being a part of my videos, shoutouts, custom avatars, giveaways, being added to our private Discord to chat during live streams, and more, please visit patreon.com/GameOverJesse, where even smaller supporters at the $1 level will get you some awesome stuff. Finally, a huge thank you to this month's supporters: George Says Hi, Link Uses the Triforce, Transcendent Sacred Courage, Glenn Cassio, Prey Warrior, Victopedia, Rusty Caulfield, Robert W., Amanda Pina, Lunarium, Chris Gasparin, Harris Priest, Lovable Christie, Key of Time 15, Jerome Major, Daryl Quinnen, Furzin 16, Kadrin, Magic Tech Review, and the Itch Network.